from us boys and girls here at Sales Geek. My name is James. Most of you have met me before. Before we get into the topic of what we're going to do, let me introduce you to our collective experts for today. And we're going to start at the top. Hopefully he's at the top of my screen or on the top of your screen. Davey, why don't you say hello to everyone and introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, guys. My name is Davey Snedden. I'm from Sales Geek Glasgow, operating in the south side of Scotland. I'm looking forward to discussing the psychology of sales today. Thanks.
Beautiful. Graham?
I'm Graham Murray. I have two franchises. One is Sales Geek Liverpool and one is up in Lancashire in the UK.
Lovely. Thank you, Graham. Cav?
Hi everyone, David Kavanagh. I look after really the southwest of England. It's Sales Geek Bath and Swindon. Fascinating topic. Looking forward to furthering the discussion.
Beautiful. And finally, Joe.
Good morning, Joe Heikkinen. I represent Sales Geek Texas out of the great old USA, and so glad to be here.
Thank you very much. So yeah, we've got some representatives from across the pond and just up and down the M6 and M1 corridors. So welcome everyone. So today's topic was to talk about the psychology of sales and why it's important. We often forget as great salespeople that sales and salesmanship is a discipline. It is a set of arts, set of crafts, set of learned behaviors, soft skills, hard skills, and when you get really into what being great salespeople is and means and what it means for great sales connections between you, clients and prospects, etc., it's a really highly regarded profession. It should be a highly regarded profession because of the amount of skills you need to be able to use within it. And I hope many of you from the field of sales, account management, customer services understand that you need to have a lot of things under your belt in terms of those skills to make you a more rounded and more effective person. At Sales Geek, we have a saying that salespeople need to only bring two things to the table, and that is honesty and integrity. Honesty and integrity breed trust. Everything else is a game. So go play those games. Now, I don't mean that you're going to lie, you're going to mistreat people, you're not going to mislead or anything like that because you're breaking the first two rules, but you're going to use psychology tricks, for example, or techniques, not tricks. You're going to use some of the techniques that should be used and ingrained in you to create better communication pathways. So that said, we're going to get into that topic today. So let's go and have a little look. So three things we want to really go over. Got a panel of experts with us today, and the boys and girls here are going to put their input into some of the topics that you're about to see. We want to understand some of the definitions behind sales psychology and why it's important and what to leverage it. And then we're going to zero in on a couple of really useful techniques that we teach and we utilize a lot here at Sales Geek, but are very commonplace and should be commonplace out in the sales world. So we're going to talk a little bit about persuasion techniques. It's a really interesting topic. And we're going to talk about psychometric profiling. And psychometrics in general is a really fascinating study. It's several hours worth of topics. We've only got half an hour, 20 minutes today to go through this stuff. So let's get into it. So gentlemen, let me open it to the panel and let me ask you to give your initial definitions and your thoughts about what psychology means to you when you're out working with your clients, when you're training and educating people out in the field. What does psychology mean?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, don't all rush.
For me, it's about understanding yourself, and then helps you understand others. So once we understand ourselves and our own style of communication, it helps us to understand others and their style of communication, and then it's adapting it in order that you communicate well between you.
Yeah.
So it's about communication there. What else would you say?
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, Cav, I think you were going there.
Cav, are you going to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I keep it fairly simple, James. Introvert versus extrovert, data-driven versus kind of high-level. Just get on with it. And the key thing, as we'll dig into later, is as Graham said, is understanding what your own predilections are versus the audience you're talking to, and making sure it's appropriate.
Yeah. And Joe, from your position, obviously, we say that Americans and Brits share a common language separated by a large body of water, right? Or something like that. There's a saying in there somewhere. from your aspect in the US, dealing with US clients and the people that you work with, we know more than anything else that psychology plays, I think, even a bigger part for your world. What's it kind of like in the US now for how people embrace or even understand the core concepts of psychology?
Yeah, I think that's true. Probably because there's such distinct differences between the geographies of the U.S. So if you're in Texas, there's certain behaviors that are, Texan, and there's certain behaviors that are in New York, and there's certain behaviors that are California, and people kind of understand that. But really understanding kind of what might be the psychology behind those behaviors is really important when you're interacting in the various spaces. So I think it definitely is really important to get a grasp on the psychology of selling and how to apply that, because there is such distinct differences. And even within states, you can have very distinct differences from the north to the south of a state, which becomes kind of like England, I guess, in that respect.
Yeah, true. I think we could all attest that how people approach and utilize psychology in Liverpool is often very different to people in London, and that north-south side of things, east and west, is a fascinating study all to itself. Okay, moving on, getting into it. So let's talk a little bit about some examples then of when we talk about psychology. It's a big field. It's a big topic. There's lots of stuff going in there. There are a lot of books you can read. There's a lot of fields of study that you can do. There's lots of really good YouTube channels that you should be listening to and watching. There's some very good podcasts about this sort of subject. And I do wonder, and I throw the question out to the wider audience listening, and I'll just ask the guys here as well, how many of you read books about this topic or listen to podcasts or watch a YouTube channel? I don't know, whatever the thing is. How many of you do that for yourself? So let me just ask that of the experts here. How many of you guys study this field or have studied this field? So Graham, you're quite an avid fan of this, I know. So what's your sort of field of study, would you say?
I think the most famous kind of book to go to for me is Surrounded by Idiots. It's just an easy read that explains DISC, the colours around DISC, let's say. So that's one. Oh, look at that. It's like people are preparing before they came on.
It's the best.
It's the benchmark, isn't it? It's one of the benchmarks for sure. Yeah. I agree. I would go so far as to say not only is, and by the way, here's our top tips for you. It is about psychology. It's about Surrounded by Idiots. It's a great book. Thomas Erickson. I would encourage you to get the book rather than listen to the pod. You can listen to the audio simply because it's got full of pretty pictures. But if you want to go one further, you can get Surrounded by Bad Bosses. And if you're really going for it, go for Surrounded by Psychopaths. So they should be in your armory. All three of those books, if you are a salesperson, if you are a sales leader, if you just want to be just marginally to amazingly better, those three books are essential on your bookshelf. Who else is listening to stuff? What are the top tips you got? Any podcasts, any things to listen to? Who else has got cool stuff?
So yeah, James, I have a slightly different learning method. I'm not a strong reader. So more recently, I've been using podcasts and audiobooks more. So I've actually just about finished Surrounded by Bad Bosses on an audiobook. But I seem to go on a lot better listening, using it in the car, using it for in time management as well. So struggle to focus when I'm reading. So audiobooks have really been helping me in that respect for learning.
And outside of the sales arena, James, I think these are great life skills. Surrounded by Idiots has taught me a lot in just social interactions and why those conversations sometimes didn't go the way you expected them to. Yes, we're different colours. So it's a great illustration.
Yeah, I think it transcends, doesn't it, just sales? We're talking about the concept today for upskilling ourselves as better, more rounded salespeople to use and adopt and embrace core elements of psychology and use it as an outward bound discipline in the field of work. However, there's also, it's about, as you just said there, it's about what you do at home as well. I use it with my kids. right? It's you should be using this with kids. You can do, and we're going to talk about DISC in a minute. You can do DISC profiles with children. Who knew that was a thing? But that's now a modern thing. So yeah, fascinating. So some fields of psychology then, as we get in there, some things that you might want to think about, things that you might want to start researching or getting into, or talk to us. We can tell you more about it. So firstly, you've got language tools. So language sets, language tools, and an example there is NLP. Gents, any of you want to throw in what NLP is?
Neuro-linguistic programming.
That's the chappy. Okay, so neuro-linguistic programming. Again, this was born from decades ago from psychologists that used it as a language framework pattern system to help people that were to get through certain mind shifts and mind patterns and stuff like that. And it was a language technique to draw out outbound conclusions and observations and work paths and stuff to go forward. It's all grand stuff. And then over the years, it sort of started to find its way into sales. And then people grabbed a hold of it. And the thing with NLP and what I find today, and I don't know what you gentlemen find, but NLP is people love it or they hate it. And I have found that NLP is very much a spectrum. At one end, it's borderline being in a cult. And at the other end, it's batshit mad. And then the other end, it's really useful for just helping certain language techniques get through certain challenges. And I give you a really good one in NLP that I like a lot, which is a reframing statement. And that is, you use it for objection handling. So someone comes at you and they give you an objection. So to test the objection, you might use a reframing statement. An example would be, Mr. Customer, the issue isn't insert issue, it's insert alternative, and that means provide benefit over the first one. So the issue isn't X, it's Y, and therefore that means Z. So Z trumps X through Y, if that makes sense. So it's a great technique, and it helps our brain move past what we think might have been an initial objection or initial mind flinch to a challenge or an issue. But it's there to test the objection. It's not to become a Jedi mind trick and put people past it. It's there to test something. Anyone use it? Just out of interest, out of you guys, you know NLP. Anyone NLP practitioners? Anyone know it?
I mean, not to any great level of expertise, but I do use the reframing piece in conversation. So yeah, not Jedi level by any means, but it's a very useful tool to use.
Cool. NLP's big in the US, Joe, right? Oh, Joe, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. I would say yes, because there's a lot of, I guess, coaches that are using NLP in their coaching sessions. So I don't know.
Yeah, coaching is a good place for it.
Yeah, it's usually, where they're trying to do coaching for individuals from various backgrounds. But I'm probably less so in the sales side of the equation from a psychometric profiling perspective, but definitely used in a coaching situation.
Again, I didn't prep the book, but if I open my door, there's a big bookshelf behind my door, and some of us are working from home today, so apologize the backgrounds. But I've got there's a great book on NLP called The Little Black Book of NLP. If you're to have another book on your shelf, that is a good one. The Little Black Book of NLP. It's the more accessible aspects of NLP. Anyway, moving on. Let's crack on. NLP, language techniques, fascinating subject all to itself. The next side of things got skill sets, something like persuasion skills. And we are going to talk about persuasion in a moment. And then we have the really big stuff, things like behavioral modeling. And there's a number of behavioral models that sort of come into play. And psychometric profiling is a really core aspect of that. And we want to get into the meat of that in just 2 ticks. And the last ones that you might want to start to think about, start researching. There's lots of really good books on this stuff. So you got things like HBM, which is human behavior modeling. So you might hear stuff about human behavior modeling or buyer behavior modeling, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of really good, rich data books, really good YouTube channels that you can listen to that give you some really good insights to how humans react and think about that sort of stuff, how we buy and why we buy. There's a lot of really good, rich information in there. Again, it's all built on around the theme of psychology. And then, of course, we've got general psychology. I would always say, and it was a thing of mine, I took up psychology many years ago. If I got asked a long time ago from several salespeople over the years to say, if I was to study something, what would I study? Negotiation skills, closing skills. What would I get really good at? And I've always said, go do a general psychology degree. Psychology will stand you in more good stead than most of those things together, because it teaches you the way to implement it, to use it, to utilize it in a way to create that better communication pathway. So there's some models. So let's get into some detail of those models. So we talked about very quickly a skill set. So this is an example of one of those skill sets, and it is the 7 basic principles of persuasion, often coined by what was his name, Robert Cialdini. Is that the book?
Yep.
Yeah, we've got the Robert Cialdini book. Most of you, again, another book you should have on your shelves. So now you've got 3, 4, 5 books on your shelf so far. It's doing all right, isn't it? By the time we finish, you'll have 7 or 8. So that's amazing. So what are the 7 principles? And then my wonderful colleagues here are going to give you some examples. So there they are on the screen. So let me ask Graham first. Pick one of those. Tell us what it is, why it's useful, and give me an example.
Let's go reciprocity. So give to get, as they say. And I think the most common used example of that is the charity pen that comes through your door for free in order that you feel compelled to give something back. So they've given you something for free in order that you feel like you should give money to that charity. Simple example.
Good. Anyone else got anything else in that?
Yeah, I love an analogy, James, as you know, and I don't know if this is going to stand water, but it's the flip side of unity to me, and it's scarcity. So in my motorcycling days, I would always look for a motorbike which nobody else had. I didn't want the VFR 800, I didn't want the GSX, I didn't want the other thing. They had to be idiosyncratic and very, very different.
That's true. Yeah, scarcity is a really good one. I remember there was an amazing advert. So now we're going to start showing our ages, right? So there was an amazing advert. I can't remember what year it was now, but Concorde was flying. So, all right, so it's going back a number of years right now. And they were advertising tickets from London to New York, return flight. And it was a specific advert, and the prices were astronomical. It's on her last voyages, I think, semi-last voyages. Not quite the last one, but because I think the last one was by invitation only. It was a semi-last voyages, and they were selling the tickets for like 10 times the price. And they just said, someone asked them on an interview, "Why are you selling them for like $20,000 or whatever it was?" And they said, "Because I've got 8 of them. If you want it, buy it. If you don't, don't." And you're like, okay, fair enough. I get it. So that whole scarcity, do you want that thing? Do you want to be in there? So you've got to create value within the scarcity model, of course. It doesn't work with an iPhone, right? Because damn things are everywhere.
Yep.
But it could work with a rare conditioned version, or something with a special color or something like that, because every now and then iPhone bring out different colored versions. So yeah, scarcity is a really good one. Joe, give us your favorite. Which one of those do you like, and why?
I'll go with the principle of liking, it's there's like the concept of everybody in sales has heard this. People buy from people they know, like, and trust. So it's really important principle. But there's really kind of 3 things that create that, and we like people who are similar to us. We like people who pay us compliments. Go figure. And we like people who cooperate with us toward goals, or want to achieve the same goals that we want to achieve. And so those 3 principles are really critical to the principle of liking. And there was a couple of studies that I came across not too long ago about this, actually, where there was some students, MBA students, where they basically were told, look, time is money, get straight down to the business. And in that group, 55% of the people were able to come to an agreement. And then another set of MBA students were given the guidance that before you begin the negotiation, talk about personal information with each other, look for similarities where you share common interest, and then begin negotiating. And in that group, 90% of the people were able to come to a successful negotiation. So there is a distinct difference there. Now that's one study clearly, but it can definitely have some power behind it.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a really good example. Thank you, Joe. Davey, what's your favourite? Got a couple left to pick from.
Okay, I've got authority. So yeah, just being able to understand if somebody has the budget and the authority to when you're selling to them. I've kind of got an example of this afternoon, an appointment I had with a potential client who I knew they were an influencer in the decision-making process, but they didn't have the authority to make the deal or not. So I knew that it allowed me to help manage my time with there. So I wasn't going to spend all day trying to close the deal because I knew there'd be a further meeting required. So yeah, authority for me.
Cool. I think your microphone's a little bit quiet. I'm not sure, but I think some of us got that. But you just might want to just speak into the microphone a little bit. Sorry about that. So I'm going to pick social proof. So social proof has always been well established through history. If it can be demonstrated, viewed, observed, and experienced outside of the one-to-one interaction within the model that you're trying to achieve, we are more likely to be persuaded by it. If others are talking about it, which also combines liking, it combines unity, it combines an element of authority as well, we are more likely to see it because socially it has been proven somewhere, whether we're using testimonials, whether we're using examples. Trustpilot is a really good example of that. Those sorts of things add to the subconscious level that if others are liking it, I will like it too, because we also collectively like to like things that others like. So that helps along as well. So there you go, 7 principles of persuasion. So the thing about the model though is the skill set. It should be within vocabulary. It should be within your written language. It should be built into a sales process, a sales cycle, and how you do what you do. You should build propositions around the 7 principles. And often when we go into organizations, it fascinates me, and I'm sure it does my colleagues here, how many organizations and salespeople don't build the core basic 7 principles into a value proposition, right? So take us, Sales Geek. Reciprocity is a core aspect of what we do. If you follow any of us, and we would encourage you and love you to come and follow all the grand gentlemen on this particular call, you'll find us all over LinkedIn, all right? And we're dropping truth bombs and nuggets and bits of information that is valuable to people that find it valuable, but it's reciprocity. We're not doing anything, but we're just happy to give it, and people might comment back on that, and sometimes we get an occasional phone call, etc. So reciprocity is a core aspect of what we do. We live in a world of authority. Currently, right now, if you come and engage with us at Sales Geek, there's over 1,200 years of collective experience, and that's just between the 5 of us. We know a thing or two about sales leadership, and how to do this stuff. All right. So come speak to experts. Experts know.
Oh, I'm not
Unity.
that old.
Oh, sorry, go on.
I said,
Sorry,
not
no, you
that
are.
old.
You are, Cav. No, you are. You are. So 7 principles, build it in. That's a core aspect. And if you're not thinking about it, there's your next top tip. Right, moving on to some more interesting stuff. So this is where the boys and girls get really excited, because we love this topic. It's underutilized. So we're talking about some of the psychology principles. We've just given a really good example there, but they work, and they work better if you understand the personality and behavior model of 2 things. You understand better the behavior of yourself and why you are like what you are. And then, this is the really tricky bit, understand who you're talking to. And when you can connect those 2 things together, understanding yourself to a more deeper degree of understanding than you might think you understand yourself today in a behavioral and motivational perspective, and then translate the same understanding to the other people on the other side of the sales desk, you will find that your communication skills, your deal making skills, your overall behavior, demeanor, and approach to sales and engaging with other humans will, 1, improve dramatically, and secondly, just make you a generally better person, I think. So what is that model? What does it all look like? Well, it's a psychometric model, and there are a number out there. Now, I don't want to get sued by anyone, so I'm not going to tell you the really great ones and the really bad ones. There are some bad ones. You can go and research that. I don't want to say who they are, but I really want to say it, but I'm not going to say it because I get sued. I'm not going to say it. So there's some good ones. So which are the one that we want to talk about today? That's a really good one. So I'm going to tee this up, and then the gents are going to get in there and give us their love for this. So this psychometric model, I would say, is the one that is the most easily accessible, hence 3 really good books about it. And it is the model of DISC. So DISC is all about colors and stuff like that, and a chart starting to build here that starts to articulate what it means. But it says as a behavior, so we're talking about behaviors only here at the moment. It says, first of all, that we are a combination of colors, all right, in our spectrum. And you might have heard this, and there's different things going on. So when we look at ourselves, we would look at ourselves to be biased, to be in sort of different frames. For example, if we are more active versus reflective on one axis, and on the other axis, are we more people focused or are we more task focused? So if we start combining these, like as it's building here, so if I'm more active based, like get stuff done, do things, get in there, and I am task focused, I like to bite-sized chunk these things up, it is reasonable to assume that within the DISC profile, I have a slightly more dominant personality. Now, there's loads of tests that you can do, and speak to us if you want some of those tests, because we've got loads of them, and you want to understand what it means to you. But I'm likely to start to demonstrate that skill set or that behavior by being when I'm being very positive, I'm going to be more direct, bit of a decisive, and a doer. But if you catch me in a bad mood or in a bad place, I might be slightly domineering. I could be a bit demanding. Take the opposite of that. Let's say I'm very people focused now. Whoops, slides moving on too quick. Apologies. I'm people focused now, and I'm a bit more reflective. I think about things. You might say that that's more steady. That's more rounded personality. So I'm more stable, more supportive, more sincere. But catch me on a bad day, I could be a bit slow, a bit sensitive. And you can read the rest of them. You get the general gist of it. Now, psychology models tell us that as human beings, most of us in the world have two primary colors that tend to stand out more than others. Most of us. There are some of us that more sit on a spectrum, we'll just leave that sentiment there, that have one real primary color. And often that is C or D. And if that is really high and nothing else is there, that puts you also a bit on a slightly different spectrum. And then you get some of us that have more rounded views where we've got three colors as a primary color. We have all four in our profile. Don't get me wrong. In every human being, all of us on this call, all of you out there and all of your customers, you have all four colors that make up you as a behavior. But at least one will be shouting higher than the others. And it's that one we're really looking for. And when we understand that particular color about ourselves, firstly, we understand a behavioral model of ourselves. And then if we can identify it in someone else, we can be more articulate when communicating with them. So let me put it into play, give you some examples, and I'm going to ask the guys some questions. So let's think that we've done a psychometric test now. You can read some of this text, and the guys are going to give some examples. So let's say you've done a psychometric assessment, either for yourself, and you've understood who you are, or you've used some of the tools and techniques that we deploy and utilize, and you've understood who you are talking to. So now you understand where the color spectrum looks like. You can see how language might adapt to be better absorbed, better understood by the other party listening to your way. So who's a big D that in our profile? I think, who did I say that was going to be? Joe, didn't I? Joe's big D, right? So Joe's got the high D in his profile. So pick one of those out, Joe, and explain to us, if you were the high D, which is the left-hand one, and you were talking to someone that was one of the other colors, how might you change and adapt your natural way of being super high D to being a little bit more, let me talk about it if I was an I, or whatever color.
Yeah, so I don't know how I got picked as a D because I'm a laid back Texan. I mean, come on, James. Yeah, I'm easy going.
I've seen the guns. I'm not messing around.
So let's take D. You said D and I, right? Okay, so yeah, so D and I, influencer is one that's a little more of the kind of like they're high energy. They like to, get out there and have a lot of fun, and that can bleed over into the conversation. But with a D, that's a very opposite sort of a situation. There's not a lot of time in a D's head to listen to a lot of stories and a lot of fun stuff. We'd rather get down to the business. So I think you want to look at that adaptive style for sure, and where you basically say the solution is not only effective but also brings flexibility, creativity to your team. And I'd love to hear how you see it fitting into your vision. So you really then take it from yourself as an I with that high energy impact that you usually have, and you want to flip it over to them. You want to make it about the D and let them get down to their business that they want to talk about. So I think that's a really important, because D's can be very, very domineering and quickly shut you down if you're not careful in how you communicate with them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Anyone else want to give me an example of between that before we move on to the next one? Because I do have a lot of questions around this area for you all, but I want to get to the end of the 4 examples before we dive into some of the questions. Anyone want to riff off that one, or are you happy to me to move on?
Let's move on.
Move on, James. I think that's what I got from there. Right. Okay. So Joe mentioned the high I. Now, I've done my DISC profile. And the thing is, DISC profiles, how long do they last and how accurate are they? Well, that's always really super subjective. So typically, most psychologists will tell you that they will last if your life is just, well, we'll go with ambling along. There's no main dramas in your life. It's just an everyday life that you lead. A decent DISC profile will last you somewhere between sort of 3 to 7, maybe a stretch out to 10 years, depending on what your age bracket is. It does morph a little bit as you get a little bit older, as you start to mature into different thoughts, ethics and morals start to adjust a little bit and all those sorts of things. But broadly speaking, it'll be roughly the same. The only time it dramatically changes, where you might shift completely from a D to an S or an S to an I, etc., is when there's been a major change in your life. So something like a death in the family, a divorce, sometimes a house move and stuff like that. But broadly speaking, if there's no major challenge in your life, then these reports, if you're doing them, or whatever your style is reasonably stable for a period of 3 to 7 years is the main period. Can go as high as 10 though. Now myself, I've done my DISC profile a number of times, and for those of you that haven't twigged it, I am the Energizer Bunny and I am high I. Okay, so it's lots of hand gestures and it's very excited and it's all about, ooh, shiny, let's go chase these things. So I can annoy people, as some of my colleagues can attest to, quite a lot when I start to talk to them in my own personal style. Now, Graham's going to give us a really good example in the moment, because Graham is the Natran opposite to me. He's a high C. And therefore, when I go at Graham with super high I, Jamesy behavior, such as, if we look at the I to C language down at the bottom, you're going to love how exciting and creative this solution is. Graham's going to get a twitchy eye. And he's going to like, yeah, maybe I won't do. Maybe you need to calm down a bit. And he's super polite, is Graham, and he's not going to tell me that. And he might give me all the buying signals. He might give me all the right things just to shut me up and get me out of the room. But is he really going to buy from me? Maybe, but the chances are much slimmer. And the reason why they're much slimmer is I haven't spoken to Graham and tempered my own style to match and mirror as much as I possibly can Graham's way of understanding the solution. And what we're trying to do is create an understanding between us. So I'm going to say the same things. I'm going to say, listen, Graham, I know you value structure and data, because I might have worked that out about him. Now here's clear, logical breakdown of how this solution works and the results it delivers. So I've said broadly the same thing, but what I've done is greatly increase my propensity that sentiment lands well. If I continue me being me, which is what I'm going to come all the way back to the sentence that we said at the beginning of the call, which is, you only have to bring 2 things to the table: honesty, integrity. Those 2 things bring trust. Everything else is a game. This is a game. Play it. Learn it. Understand the rules. Play it. Have fun. Enjoy it. But all I'm doing here is tempering my high I to meet what I know is a model of mindset that Graham has, to just tie our communication language better together. Would that be fair, Graham?
Yeah, I was just going to say that you revealed yourself as a high I when you said that you like books with pretty colours in it.
It's so true. It's so true. It's so true. I tried listening to it as an audio book, and I'm like, yeah, but I can't see the pictures. I need pictures.
I was going to say a perfect example right in front of us was just how long it took me to go through the D example and how long it's taken James to go through the I example.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Boom. Big Joe, straight to the point. This is what it is. Bang, 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 bang. Do that. Job done. Me, I've gone round the houses, and effectively I'm still going around them. So I'll shut up now. But anyway, Graham, it's the right thing, right?
It is, yeah. I would listen to the one on the right, but less so the one on the left, because it takes too long.
Yeah, exactly right. Anyway, I'm going to move on now before I get shouted at. Right, okay. So, high I to the colours. Now, what about the S? Now, this is a really interesting stat I do want to bring up. So, there are some really good studies out there that you can go and read about what the percentage of humans are in each of the colour spectrum. Let me just ask you guys the quick question, see how much you know your homework. Of the overall population, this is an estimate, of course, all right? But there are a number of books that back this data up. What do we think the population, human population, has high S as their primary profile? Percentage of population.
It's the most, isn't it? 60 odd percent.
Yeah, 69%. 69% human population is a high S. Right? That's really fascinating to know, isn't it? So sometimes the thing that we, and it's going to play out in a slide in a moment, that we wonder why we get ghosted. We wonder why people don't connect with us or want to talk to us and stuff, because of a very particular trait that S's have, which comes up in the moment. So I can't remember which one of you guys was talking about it, but tell me about S, Cav and or Davey.
Yeah, I'll go on.
The microphone's working. Can you
Oh,
hear
so-
me a bit better?
No.
No, can't hear you at all, dude.
I
I don't know what it is. So Cav will have to go.
Yeah, because that's my next dominant colour. So I'm also II and closely followed by an S. But I'm going to talk to D, because something on the quadrant there talks about polar opposites, and you normally sit side by side. That makes sense. So if I'm talking to a D, who are very dynamic, very driven, the S part is caring, sharing, and wanting to take people on the journey, you would normally say my natural style would be exactly that. I want to make sure the solution feels just right before we move forward, make sure it's all lovely. Whereas if I'm talking to you, James, you're going to want to hear, or Joe, product's going to help you achieve your goals quickly and efficiently. Let's focus on the outcomes and decide the next steps. Bang, on a plate. There you go.
Exactly that, right? Joe loves that. And I'm going to like the next sentiment underneath, where I understand how that engages with others and stuff like that. Graham's going to like the sentiment below it, and S's are going to love just looking after each other, because S's are very people-orientated individuals. It doesn't mean that we're not all people-orientated. We all care deeply about our fellow human beings, but our brains, when it comes to sales, when it comes to business, when it comes to the function of a role that I perform in an organization, our brains have a natural instinct to divert to type. So we can still be super good human beings, very caring boys and girls, and I'd like to think I'm quite a caring person. But when it comes to business, I've got to get to the point. I've got to get to the thing that we're trying to here to do. Stop wasting time. Whereas I wouldn't act like that to someone who was a high S, because their natural caring about human side of things and feelings and themselves and those around them still is their prominent thing, even within business. So it's a really important part. Graham, this is yours. Tell us it.
It is the correct disc profile, as I'd like to call it. No, so I'll go with communicating with a D. So the natural style. I'm actually high D and secondly C, but I would bring logic and detail to a conversation if I was high C, and naturally that's not necessarily what a D wants. So if I'm pitching to someone, I would assume that they're a D first, keep it concise, talk about the outcome, and then stop. Because we know that if they're not a D, they then reveal themselves as a C or an I or an S, because they're going to ask more questions. So if I'm speaking to a D and I'm a C, I will go concise, a very kind of short, lack of detail, and then prepare if they reveal themselves as something else. So in this situation, this solution is the most effective, results-driven option. It's designed to save you time and deliver exactly what you need, and then stop. Yeah. It's interesting, Sue, who I work with in Sales Geek, we both lead with D, but she's quite high I and I'm quite a high C. So when we go into a sales situation, we see it very differently. But it's that good combination. Team selling is a team game, isn't it? So by getting those two opinions first, it helps before we go into the room.
Can you drill down on that a little bit for me then? So can you share an example of where you've adapted a sales approach based on your style versus a buyer style that you've identified?
Yeah, let me use a prospect that I was in last week, where it's an engineering type business and there's a lot of C in the room. And they had one pitch deck, and it was a bit like if a clothes shop only sold medium jumpers, one size doesn't fit all. So they've got one pitch deck for all industries and all personality types. And what we need to do there is change the pitch deck, assuming that it's a high D first, but for different industries, but especially for different personality types. So the initial work that I'll do with that business is on that pitch deck and with those people, profiling them, and then getting them to understand the customers that they're going to see in order that they can adjust that pitch deck in front of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good example. Joe, let me ask you a question, if I may. So, regardless of what Joe tells us, Joe's high D, right? So we all pay attention. If Joe talks, we're doing it. It's fine. So how do you build trust with buyers who exhibit a steadiness trait?
Yeah, I think it's definitely one where that's the complete on the board. It's the complete opposite, right? So I think you want to just make sure that what you're communicating is one of being consistent in behavior and performance. And I think it's also, as you think about, one of the things that a D wants to do is to take over the situation, right? Is high control factor in a D, right? So you want to just focus on relenting a little bit on that control and allowing for the S to have a suggestion in the mix of the conversation, right? So I think that's the approach that I would use is really try to tamp down my desire to move the conversation forward as quickly as possible and control the conversation, but ask a lot of questions, right? So I think the more questions you can ask, the more control you can potentially give way in that conversation and help the S come to alignment and agreement with you.
Interesting. I think in that sort of space, we haven't talked about it on this call, we haven't elaborated it out, but because today's session is more about a fundamental aspect of psychology, which is this human behavior stuff, but there's more things that pop into it, such as emotional intelligence. And we talk about emotional intelligence a lot, and who has it and in what abundance, and who doesn't have it, and what does that actually mean? Cav, can you give me an example when it comes to working within DISC profiles, when working and managing with teams, how you, or what role does emotional intelligence play when interpreting sort of profiles within individuals, either managing your own or those within a team around you?
Yeah, huge part. I think because emotional intelligence is the platform off which all of these conversations happen, and if you're not emotionally wired, and I've worked with people, I've had bosses who are very binary, shall we say, that they're even sort of rocket scientists or high thinkers. If they lack the emotional intelligence, they just can't gain. And actually, I think the most fulfilling people to work for are ones that have a higher EQ than an IQ, because if you can't connect, then all of this stuff kind of goes to the wall. Really, it means nothing. For me, EQ. I take EQ over IQ any day.
Hey James, I was gonna add
So go on.
to that statement, because I think it's really important to have that sort of EQ. And I think you said it earlier in the conversation, where if you really understand your own profile and know that's kind of your makeup, that's kind of, in my mind, that's the kind of the beginning of EQ, right? Is self-understanding, self-awareness, developing that self knowledge. And one of the questions that I learned early on, because as you said, I am a D, it is my highest part of my profile, was to ask make sure in my mind I always had the seek to understand point of view in the setting that I was in, right? But I thought, this is a real important thing for a D to do, is because a D doesn't necessarily want to seek to understand, right? So it's really kind of a challenge to do that. I want to just know the facts, right? But I think it can apply across all profiles. So if you as a I are interacting with a D, if you come in with that seek to understand mindset, then you naturally will adapt or potentially adapt better to their profile. So it's just something that I've learned over my career to put first, seek to understand when I'm in a situation.
Yeah, and just on that, Joe, it's a great
I
point.
think
In meetings now, I put imaginary coloured hats on people in the room. It just helps to remember, right,
That's good.
that guy needs the data, that guy's going to be really pushing it through, and, adapt your style accordingly.
I think, Graham, you and I spoke about this a little while ago when you were in the office. We've seen examples out in the workspace of organizations that we work with where if there's open plan offices and stuff, they've gone to the extent of putting colored bricks on their desks to demonstrate to others around them what their profile is, so that when people rock up to their desk to say, come and have a chat with them, they know what their profile is. This is a great example of an organization that's properly embracing, DISC and psychometric profiling and stuff. So they know themselves and they're going up to speak to a colleague. Sorry?
I was just going to say, link to that, you can also look where those desks are. So we did disc profiling in one business that I was working in, and the central, it was an open plan office, and the central nest of tables, the central group of tables, all the greens and yellows were sat there, because they're all the people who love to interact with each other, the people. And then in the corner there was a lady who was a high C, a blue, because she couldn't handle being on that central table. And then every Wednesday morning we had a weekly meeting. The leader, who was a high D, came in last into that meeting, sat down and cracked on with business. So you could tell where people sat in an office. It gives an indication of what colour or what disc profile they are.
Yeah. It's a really good valid point, I think, because it colours have a natural ability to draw. We like what we like who we like like-minded. We were talking about that with persuasion skills. So it's interesting. So the EI thing, the emotional intelligence, emotional quotient, EQ, EI, whatever you want to language it, it's a really important part of understanding the baseline of what psychometric profiling is and how you regulate it. So for those of us that need to remind us of what that is, so emotional intelligence, I've got to test my memory now. There's some really good books on this. I can probably go and tell you what one is. So emotional intelligence is made up of 5 core areas, right? We must remember self-awareness, know yourself, know who you are, and be conscious of it. And I think we observe this a lot, that people think they know themselves, but it's the lack of consciousness. I don't mean you're asleep, but it's the lack of self-awareness that really is a very telling part of salespeople. We see it. They talk about themselves, they talk, or whatever. High eyes are lower on the EI side. So you've got to be very conscious. That self-awareness, you have to be constantly thinking about it. Self-awareness breeds self-regulation, because if you understand the awareness, you can regulate those things that might be hitting the edges of comfortableness for other people, yourselves, or other those around you. When you combine those two together, you create a baseline for motivation. And motivation has certain drivers, certain behavioral patterns, certain models within it that help us create action. And what we're trying to do as good salespeople, what we're trying to do as people through communication patterns is to create motivation. So motivation to act, motivation to do. Ideally, we want them to buy your product, do your thing, whatever the stuff is. But we want to motivate to move forward. And moving forward to a closure, i.e. we've lost the deal, we aren't doing it, that's also a good thing. Move forward. So firstly, build self-awareness, create self-regulation. These two things create motivation. And then the last two, develop empathy. All right. Great understanding of psychometric profiling starts to understand where empathy sits, which was to Joe's point, coming with that curious mind, coming with understanding about others around you. And that comes from empathy. High S's have it. It's slightly less obvious in high D's and C's, but it is there, but you need to bring it more to the fore. And ultimately you wrap these 4 things into social skills. Now today, that EI has always been those 5 core tenets, but today under psychology, under a greater understanding of human behavior and all this sort of great stuff, there's some more modules in there, more things you can go and advance yourself on, go and learn about. So other components of EI include things like social awareness. So how do we present now on platforms? How do you do it on LinkedIn? What are you like when you are engaging on Facebook versus something else, etc.? Your personal views versus professional views, example. Relationship management. Relationship management is an entire field to itself. Not going to cover that, but it's a whole thing. And then two really cool component parts here: stress management and self-mood regulation, which is not the same as self-regulation. Mood regulation and stress management are really critical aspects of understanding that core underpinning behavior. But those core elements, they're the things that can be measured, by the way. All of this can be measured in a human being. We can test for it. We at Sales Geek test for it all the time within people that we work with in businesses. And then from there, you can build out really effective communication pathways between you and other people around you. Anyway, it's enough about that. Let's do the last thing about DISC. And yeah, doing all right. Okay, so the last thing I want to put up on the screen is to give you a little cheat sheet. So this is something we use here in Sales Geek. I'm just going to let it build and we'll pick some areas. So this cheat sheet, I have to be careful how I say that, gives you some dialogue and a way to think about what interactions look like. So across the top, we've got the 4 colors, right? We have our high Ds, our high yellows. So this is assuming these are the super high elements of the spectrum. And down the left-hand side, we've got some scenarios. And if you start to think about engagements with people within these scenarios, it will make you a much more effective communicator. And I'll give you one example and we can build up a few stories from there. So for example, let's take the top one. When you back someone into a corner, and we've all been there as salespeople, right? We've either been backed into a corner, and I reckon this will resonate with you, or we've backed someone into a corner. And we might not mean to, but sometimes you've got to do it, right? Or sometimes you've done it by accident. So backing people into a corner. So therefore, there's a behavior to that activity. And we, us 5 here on this call, you at home listening to this or watching this, whichever one you're doing, and your customers will act accordingly. So the high D personality, the Joes of the world, and Graham with his slightly higher D, although I would contest that. They become very autocratic. All right, very autocratic. Yes, no. Now, autocracy actually has its benefits. Yes, beautiful, like it. We're doing it. Yes, decision made. Move on. No, decision made. Ah, shucks. That's not what I was looking for. But it's been really quick. Very autocratic. The high yellows, though, the me's of the world, the back me in the corner, they come out as the attacker. Now, I'm not coming swinging at you with a bat, but I might be coming at you more verbally, more emotionally orientated. So we're going to do this. We're not going to do this. But the decision is led by emotion more. Whereas high reds are more making it based on everything you've said, collating all the data and information together, and on balance of everything that's just been said, yes or no. So it's a more pragmatic approach. So there's now pros and cons to putting a yellow and a red into a corner. Let me ask you the question, gents. One of those colors you can change the mind of better than the other. Which one can you change the mind of better?
Green.
No, just stick with red and yellow at the moment. We'll do greens and blues in a sec.
Oh, yellow.
So red and yellow, you backed them in a corner. One of those you can change the mindset of. The other one, less so. Anyone want to hazard a guess?
Well, the yellow.
Yeah.
Yellow you can change, red you're unlikely to.
Actually, it's the other way around. Right? So reds, because they take the decision from a more pragmatic view, if you present more data, more information, a different point of view, proper, not bringing all the emotion to it, but it's more information, more data, more stuff that I can assess in a fair and reasonable way. The autocracy nature of a high red, they are okay to go back, well, on the rebalancing of this information, the knowledge and the data you've given me, I'm now going to change my mind. That is more likely to happen with red. However, yellows, because they lead more with emotion, they become stubborn. And for those of you that know me, and my wife would be out the door now, and she'd be desperate to peer through this door and go, oh yeah, that's him. All right. So if I make my mind up and I've made it from a point of emotion, I am less likely to want to change that mind, because partly I'm stubborn and partly I don't like to be proved wrong, right? And that's a yellow behavior. That is a trait. So backing a yellow into the corner is really dangerous unless you know they're coming out swinging your behavior in your corner. If they're coming out swinging for you, great, let them go. They're like a wrecking ball into the business. Off you go. But if they're not coming out swinging in your behavior for your side, very hard to change their minds, because they just dig the heels in. Whereas a red, like, yeah, new information, let's do something different. Fine. Now, take the same scenario though. Let's now apply that to a green and a blue personality. So you put a green into the corner, they become avoiders. And we've all met them. 69% of the global population. They try not to make the decision. They try to avoid it, slinky out, whatever the thing is. I'll come back to it, whatever. And it's because greens don't like pressure. Whereas high blues are more likely to concede the thing you want, and then they will renege on it later. Because the pressure is off, you're not in their face, and I can change my mind later. So if you're ever wondering why you've engaged with someone and you haven't quite got an answer, and then they went for it, and then 2 days later you got the cancellation through on your order, it's because they were probably a green-blue or blue-green in their profile. And they did anything and everything they could do to get you off their back. And then when you weren't there applying pressure on them anymore, not backing them into the corner, they got rid of you. And we see this all the time. So backing people into a corner is a thing that happens. Try not to do it. It has a definitive outcome to reds and greens, reds and yellows. It's more slippery with the other two colors. Does that make sense how the cheat sheet works? We'll just work through a couple of examples. Another one that's really good is the measure value in you. If we think about psychometric profiling in the sense of we're trying to seek understanding of ourselves, the EI piece, the EQ, and we're trying to seek understanding of others around us. Therefore, we are trying to build value. We're trying to get the other party to say, yeah, I like this engagement. I like that individual, whatever it is. I trust them. I like them, whatever these things are. So therefore, you are measuring value at a subconscious level. We all do it. These gentlemen here measure value in me. I measure value in them. We all do it in a sales environment. It happens, but it's done at a subconscious level. So the high red, Joe, little bit of Graham, they will measure value in you by the results you will end up delivering, right? They're not so worried about how you got there. They are interested in the results it generated. Now, there is a time limit to that. You can't be generating results in weeks and months' time if it's a here and now thing. But it's the result that matters, that generates the value. Yellows like the support and applause. Now, that's not backslapping and all the rest of it. But what it is saying it's appealing to a yellow's. So you check which one? Cav, you're yellow, aren't you, on your profile?
I am.
Yeah. So talking to Cav, it would be something like, listen, Cav, you've changed out. So let's say I was selling a CRM system. I'll pick something random there. So now I'm in there. Cav, you've changed out a system in the past. What was the system you changed? Cav tells me the system. And I'll say, listen, what did you do? What was the thing that you did that you went through the change program? What was your approach to this? What was your methodology? How did you do it? And how did you decide that that platform was the one? Cav tells me a story. So what I would do is support that decision making. That was a really good choice. I like what you did there. That's interesting. Why did you do that rather than that? So it shows Cav an interest in him, but an interest in the right decisions he made. Does that make sense? That's where value will come from. If I just go, oh yeah, no, that's interesting, doesn't mean that that doesn't generate value, but he's going to be a bit sat there going, dude, I've just told you how I've done an amazing thing and you haven't paid a single bit of attention to it. Whereas greens, it's about attention. Now, you're not going to send them flowers. All right, we're not on a dating agency here, but you are going to make sure that they're okay. That I'm just going to make sure that we're going through this buying process. You're in the sales cycle, Mr. and Mrs. Customer. I just want to make sure you're all right. Are you all right? Are you all right around you? Is everyone all right? Can I do anything for you? Are you okay? And we're just leveraging that you're okay piece. The blues, however, Graham, they really want to understand a lot more about the activity. So the result is just as important, but they want to know you're on it. So rather than deliver a result in 2 weeks' time, you're also keeping them updated at landing points throughout the week or 2 weeks to say, here's where I'm at, here's where we're doing, here's where I'm up to. So it's showing activity within that. Would that be fair, Graham?
Absolutely.
I keep picking on you because you believe.
If any of my customers are on this, they'll know exactly that we talk about the activity that leads to results. So
Yep.
Yeah, guilty as charged.
See, hi Blue, mate. You can rest that red stuff. That's fair. Rubbish. I'm only joking. So I'm not going to go through too anymore, but gents, I'll just open it up to the table. We've got the last few minutes left here, and then I think we're done. All I want to say on this is this kind of encryption. Take a photograph of it, or reach out to your local geek to get more detail about how we do what this does. So what we will end up doing if we ended up in your organization is we profile everyone that's in the business. We build out all the personas about what you are like, what it is, the optimal salesperson, all that sort of great stuff to engage out in the world. And then we build the personas of the people that you sell to. And then we map these models between you and them, and we create better pathways of communication through lots of stuff that we do. Won't go into that sort of level of it today. But this is really important. This is the real gold dust of what will make you better communicators. Sales is about two things only: bring honesty and integrity. They'll build trust. Everything else is a game. Go play those games. So if I could ask you to leave a nugget of wisdom, truth, anything like that you want to say, if you could remember one thing, remember this. What could I ask each of you to leave with the audience with? I'm going to try you, Davey, with your microphone. Is your microphone working? Go for it. Have a go. Not working at all.
Right. Frost.
Can't hear you at all now.
Try it now. Any better?
Yeah, go on. Great. Give us a nugget. Give us some wisdom. Everyone put your ears to the TV.
Listening. Yeah, no, listen, in terms of DISC, I've used it quite recently doing some mentoring. So just tuning in and understanding your own colour and perceptions and feelings really helps you to articulate yourself in a sales or a buying environment. So yeah, just try and understand what you're doing yourself, and then you can secondly start to understand the people around you.
Okay, I don't think any of us got any of that, but thank you very much. I know what Owen's going to do. Owen is going to obviously carve this up. He's going to sit on YouTube, and there's some podcasts on this. But one thing Owen will do, which is our producer for this show, he suddenly cocked an eyebrow. I'm a producer, that's impressive. He's going to put subtitles to all of this, so I reckon Davey's stuff will come out at the end of it, so that's all right. Graham, give us a top nugget that you would give.
I would go back to that selling is a team game, and if you have a significant opportunity, then the natural thing to do is to go to a colleague who is like you and ask their opinion. But go to colleagues who are different to you, and then you get the opinions that will help you to win that deal. Much more likely to win a deal if it's a team game, and take 4 colours into your team.
I like that. Cav.
2 words: know thyself. That's the foundation you're going to build everything on. And to Graham's point, you can build that team around you. There's no point in having a bunch of greens, yellows, blues, or reds. You need a blend. You need that broad skill set.
Very good. I like that. Know thyself. Is that not 3 words? Thyself? Or is that 1 word? Is it 1 word?
Make it 2.
Is it 1
Make
word?
it know thyself.
Make it
Whatever.
2. It's 2 words now. You heard it first. Cav says it's 2. We'll go with that.
I'd
And
use
Joe,
it for
what
yellow.
nugget of truth would you like to give everyone?
Brevity.
Go on,
So,
Joe, what do you give us?
Yeah, so I was this may be a little bit different. It's not a nugget of truth, but I was thinking as we were doing this, one of the questions that might be out there on people's mind is like, this is great if you're face to face, right? So how do you do this if your first interaction is not face to face? Like, how do you do this if, how do you try to understand somebody's psychometric profile without ever talking to them across the table, right? And I think that's a really important thing to consider, because there's so much sales activity that happens prior to that moment you're in front of the customer. But there are things you can do. And so I would suggest, look at the social media profiles, look at the way they write posts, look at how they maybe even present themselves on their LinkedIn profile. You can gain so much information about another person's DISC profile just by digging in a little bit, doing a little bit of research. And there's actually a couple of tools out there that you can use that are apps. I won't name the name of one of those that is out there, but If you look for apps out there, you can put somebody's LinkedIn profile into an app and it will come out with a suggestion on what their DISC profile is. So
Yeah.
there are tools that you can use, but this can apply even in situations where you can't get face to face, especially in this world of social media when so many people are putting things out there. You can use those and look at those to kind of gain knowledge ahead of that face to face meeting.
Yeah, I think that's really important. There are a lot of tools out there. So big tips then, definitely get your own profiles done. If you've never done them before, do them. They are valuable insight into yourself. And the thing to bear in mind, if it's true about you, it must be true about others. So therefore, go seek out that truth. Go find out what other people are and then start adjusting yourself. And the last tip I'll give you from this, our last slide then, is everything we've been doing has been talking about the art of communication, the verbal art of communication. DISC goes beyond verbal communication. It's also written communication. It's how you build your websites, your proposals, how you send emails. How we read information is exactly the same as how we hear information when it comes to psychometric profiling. So think broader and wider and deeper than just the said word as the thing. Is that a said word? Can we have a said word? We'll have a said word. All right, okay, so we kind of ran through that in 53 odd or minutes or so. Sorry, an hour and 5 minutes, so that was pretty good. So up on the screen right now is everybody's email and phone number if you want to go and say hello. There's also a QR code which takes you off to, I have no idea where it takes you. I never looked. So that'll take you somewhere. I think it's our website. I don't know. Yeah, go have a look with the QR codes. I hope someone hasn't put something inappropriate on there. But we've got some more events coming up. We do these every single month. We will be trying to be better with microphones and not all in offices and stuff like that will be next time around. So January 23rd, 2025, we've got the art of building rapport and trust in sales. So there's some really good things in there about some really practical techniques and styles that you can have. And then later on in February, for those of you that are interested in becoming a geek, taking on one of our franchises, being anywhere in the world, and we have franchises all over the world now, what is the life like as a part-time sales director? Maybe these lovely gentlemen might be back on with us, or some others, to tell you what their life is like and what it means to be there. So anyway, I've been James. Owen has been the wonderful producer. He's going to shut it all off in a second. I want to say very thank you for Silent Davey. I want to say thank you for Big C Graham. I want to say big thanks to Big I Cav and Super Big D Joe in Texas, because we can't argue with Joe because he's got the guns, so therefore we just got to go with that. And we're going to see you on the next one. If I can ask the panelists just to stay there. It's been nice to see everyone. See you next month.
Take care.
Thank you. So hopefully that shut down. I'm hoping it has.